John 14. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. And whither I go, ye know, and the way ye know.
Because see, we're going to have these different nations in slavery, not only on earth, but also on other planets. That's the glory of the kingdom. We're going to have servants on other planets. We're going to colonize other planets. All right? We're going to expand. You think about this truth, you think about the gospel, you think about the plan of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. Hey, you got that one song by Drake, God's plan. You think about God's plan is going to take place on the earth. There's really a blueprint for what's going to happen all throughout the entire universe. For all throughout the entire universe. What we're doing is a part of a blueprint. You know, like this truth is a franchise, and it's going to branch out. It's going to expand all throughout the universe, man. To distant galaxies, you know? So don't be surprised, you know, you brother, the hopeful elect, the Lord give you your own galaxy or your own planet, own planets, and you colonize them, and you implement the laws, statutes, commandments on them, and you're going to have servants on these planets. All right?
But as it is written, I have not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. But God hath revealed them unto us by his Spirit.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Kakadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elder, the GMS, who rule well, teach well, being great examples to us younger brothers. Peace and blessings, salutations to the hopeful elect out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds. In the name of Yahweh Bashim Al Shah, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashim Al Shah. All right, now what I want to get into this morning, you know, the continuation of the book of 2 Samuel. All right, and we made it to the 13th chapter, okay, where we're going to see, you know, one of King David's daughter, you know, be defiled by one of his sons. Okay, because remember, matter of fact, let's go to chapter 12. Okay, one of the punishments, okay, for King David's, okay, adultery, all right, and this conspiracy to have Uriah the Hittite, you know, put to death, okay, is here in 2 Samuel 12 and 11. It says, this is what the Lord says, because of what you have done, I will cause your own household to rebel against you. Okay, I will give your wives to another man before your very eyes, and he will go to bed with them in public view. You did it secretly, but I will do this. I will make this happen to you openly in the sight of all Israel. Okay, so we're going to see shameful things begin to happen, you know, in the house of David, you know, as a punishment. All right, because of what he's done. Okay, in which, you know, he was spared his life. All right, but he didn't go unscathed. Okay, so you know, it will always be a sword, you know, in this house. All right. Matter of fact, yeah, verse 10, it says, from this time on, your family will live by the sword, because you have despised me by taking Uriah's wife to be your own. Okay, so now when we get to verse 13, we're going to see, you know, upheaval, you know, rebellion. All right, we're going to see the sword, okay, be within, you know, King David's house, his family. All right, it says, now David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and Amon, all right, and Amnon, all right, her half brother fell desperately in love with her, all right, which this wasn't her half brother because they had the same father, but they had a different mother. All right, Absalom and Tamar had the same mother, but Amnon had a different mother than them. Okay, so you're from the seed of your father. All right, so if you come from your father's seed, there's no half. All right, brothers, okay, and sisters. Okay, 2 Samuel 13:2, it says Amnon, because so obsessed with Tamar that he became ill. All right, so he was, so obsessed, all right, with Tamar that he became sick. He became physically sick. Okay, it said she was a virgin, and Amnon thought he could never have her. But Amnon had a very crafty friend, his cousin Jonadab. He was the son, all right, of David's brother, all right, Shemiah, all right, so King David's nephew, okay, old cunning, old slick nigga, all right. It says one day Jonadab said to Amnon, "What's the trouble? Why should the son of a king look so dejected morning after morning?" So Amnon told him, "I am in love with Tamar, my brother's Absalom's, all right, sister." Well, Jonadab said, "I tell you what to do. Go back to bed and pretend you are ill. When your father comes to seek you, ask him to let Tamar come and prepare some food for you. Tell him you'll feel better if she prepares it as you watch and feeds you with her own hands." So this guy, all right, Jonadab, all right, he's playing the role of a serpent, all right, in this account. He's teaching Amnon how to be crafty, man. Setting them up for failure. You see, just as the serpent, set up Eve for failure. Okay, which ultimately set the nation up for failure, man. All right, and which we was going into this the other day. All right, which when you go into it, it's talking about doctrine, but it can be manifold when you go here to 1 Corinthians 15, all right, and 33. All right, because this is talking about false doctrines amongst the church. Okay, but anything outside of righteousness, is a false doctrine. You know, so this is 1 Corinthians 15:33. Be not deceived. All right, evil communications corrupt good manners. All right, and this guy, Amnon's cousin, he was evil communications. He was giving him poor advice. Okay, in this situation. He should have told this man, "Look, you the king's son. Go get you a woman just as fine as Tamar." Okay, that's not your sister. Okay, you got plenty of women to choose from. Why you hung up on her? All right, but he gave him a crafty, you know, deceptive, plan, to get what he wanted. Okay, to play off his lust. Okay, and we're gonna see what that's gonna get him. You see, so let's go here back to 2 Samuel 13. Get it back in the NLT. All right, this is back in 2 Samuel chapter 13. All right, in verse 6, it says, "So Amnon lay down and pretended to be sick. And when the king came to see him, Amnon asked him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and cook my favorite dish as I watch. Then I can eat it from her own hands.'" Okay, so he's pretending to be sick, and he was questioning his sister, to come cook and feed him. Okay, it says, "So David agreed and sent Tamar to Amnon's house to prepare some food for him. When Tamar arrived at Amnon's house, she went to the place where he was lying down so he could watch her mix some dough. Then she baked his favorite dish for him, but when she set the serving table before him, he refused to eat. Everyone get out of here. Amnon told his servants, so they all left. Okay, so he cleared the room where it would just be him and Tamar. Then he said to Tamar, Now bring the food into my bedroom and feed it to me here. So Tamar took his favorite dish to him. But as she was feeding him, he grabbed her and demanded, "Come to bed with me, my darling sister." Then she said, "No, my brother," she cried. "Don't be foolish. Don't do this to me. Such wicked things are not done in Israel." Okay? So that wasn't, because there's a law, you weren't supposed to deal with your sister. Okay? Now, you had, Abraham, okay, deal with Sarah, all right, which, uh, was his close kin. But as we grew as a nation, all right, that became a law not to do that. Okay, with certain relatives, you go into the uh, go into the law. All right, you weren't supposed to deal, all right, with your sister, your auntie, all right, your father's wives that wasn't your mother. You weren't supposed to deal. Apostle Paul had that, discrepancy in the book of Corinthians. A guy dealt with, his father's wife. Okay, so this wasn't, the way. Okay, so she's telling him like, look, don't do this. you know. So he's in his lust. Verse 13 says, "Where could I go in my shame, and you would be called one of the greatest fools in Israel? Please just speak to the king about it, and he will let you marry me." So she's pretty much trying to get out of the situation. She's trying to tell him something, to put him at ease so she can get out of the situation and not be defiled. All right. But Amnon wouldn't listen to her. And since he was stronger than she was, he raped her. Then suddenly Amnon's love turned to hate, and he hated her even more than he had loved her. "Get out of here." He snarled at her, man. And this is how you know the Lord just had a spirit on Amnon to do this, man. To bring shame into the house. All right, because this was a shameful thing. Okay, so you read on. It says, "No, no," Tamar cried, "sending me away now is worse than what you've already done to me." But Amnon wouldn't listen to her. So now not only did he defile her, now he hates her. He just wants to, that he didn't quit. Okay, well, that's even more shame unto her. Okay, and there will be a judgment for that. All right, it says he shouted for his servant and demanded, "Throw this woman out," and lock the door behind her. So the servant put her out and locked the door behind her. She was wearing a long, beautiful robe, as was the custom in those days for the king's virgin daughters, man. So there was even specific robes, all right, that King David's daughter would wear. Okay, his virgin daughters would wear. Okay, but she's been defiled. She's no longer a virgin. So when you get to verse uh, 19, "But now Tamar tore her robe and put ashes on her head, and then with her face in her hand, she went away crying. Her brother Absalom saw her and asked, 'Is it true that Amnon, all right, has been with you?' 'Well, my sister, keep quiet for now, since he's your brother's. Don't worry about it.' So Tamar lived as a desolate woman in her brother's Absalom's house. Okay, so they kept it hush. Okay, and they didn't want it to get out because of the shame it will bring. Okay, it says when King David heard what had happened, he was very angry. So he got to King David, he was angry. But King David knew that this was happening because of his sin. So now he's feeling this pressure of all these things transpiring in his house. You know, so the Lord he's chastising, King David. I say he didn't get away unscathed. you know, he's being chastened. Okay, just as we're being chastened, man. Even though we're in the Lord's favor, all right, we're entered into His mercy through His word, we're still chastened. The Lord plagues us, and a lot of time it's a plague of the mind. See, King David is a mighty man. He's used to conquering and fighting and overcoming. Well, see, the Lord is plaguing him in the mind, and this is the main captivity that we're in at this time is in the mind, the plague of the mind. Okay, the Lord chasten our minds, by creating certain scenarios, and he make us feel it. You know, like a lot of time, brothers walk around with that chastisement of the mind, and we just got to bear it and endure it and still operate and function in that chastisement, man. But it's purifying us. Okay, this is Hebrews 12:5. It says, and it says that ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaking unto you as unto children. My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. Okay? So we can't despise the chastening of the Lord. We got to deal, and you got to gird up our loins and deal. There's certain, chastening of the mind you just can't escape. You see? Because it's in your mind. The Lord set up certain scenarios to where we're forced, to deal, all right, with the bitterness, man. Okay? Verse 12, it says, for whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth and scourges every son whom he receiveth. So we're being scourged. Our minds are being scourged. Okay? Being purified. Okay? So we're seeing King David have to endure being scourged in the mind. Okay? Let me see. Get this word scourged in the Greek. See what it gives us.
Strong's G 3146, mastigao. Mastigao. Thayer's Lexicon, related entry, mastizo. Mastizo.
Yep, and you go down here to the Strong's. It said metaphorically, of the Most High as a father, chastening and training men as children by afflictions. Okay? Of the Most High as a father, chastening and training men as by afflictions. Okay? So the Lord trains his sons through affliction. You see, and King David's story was full of affliction, and the Lord's balance. King David, he got to kick it. Yeah, he was well off. Like I say, crazy numbers. You see, conquering and spoiling, and he had wives, children. Okay, but the Lord he kept his foot on his neck. And that keeps us humble. These afflictions keeps us humble. Not to become proud. Okay. So this is how the Lord trains his sons through chastening, man. Okay. So this going back, you see. So you go back here to 2 Samuel 16, means 13, and start back at 19. Let's get this back in the NLT. All right, 1 Samuel chapter 13. In 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 19, it says, but now Tamar tore her robe and put ashes on her head, and then with her face in her hands, she went away crying. Her brother Absalom, all right, saw her and asked, is it true that Amnon has been with you? Well, my sister, keep quiet for now. Since he's your brother, don't worry about it. So Tamar lived as a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard what happened, he was very angry. And though Absalom never spoke, all right, to Amnon about this, he hated Amnon deeply because of what he had done to his sister. So Absalom, all right, he was plotting on this guy, but he kept it in. He didn't speak on it, but he was waiting for opportunity. All right. So it says 2 years later, when Absalom's sheep were being sheared at Baal Hazar near Ephraim, Absalom invited all the king's sons to come to a feast. And it just shows you the abundance, that they had, because all his children had their own living quarters. Okay. They had their own substance. Okay. They was able to throw feasts, so this, everybody was well off. And that's how it's going to be in the kingdom. All our children are going to be well off, man. They're going to have their own palaces and their own servants, okay, their own, substance, okay. They're going to be able to throw feasts, Okay. So reading on, it says, he went to the king and said, my sheep shearers are now at work. Would the king and his servants please come to celebrate the occasion, all right, with me? The king replied, no, my son. If we all come, we will be too much of a burden on you, you know? So King David, like, look, throw your feast, for your brothers and them. Like, if we come, like y'all ain't equipped to kick it like we kick it. You made to that level yet, you know? It says the king replied, my son, if we all come, we will be too much of a burden on you. Absalom pressed him, but the king would not come, though he gave Absalom his blessing. So King David gave him his blessing, to throw the feast. Well, then Absalom said, if you can't come, how about sending my brother Amnon with us? Why Amnon? The king asked. And you see how they had to go through King David to do anything. Amnon couldn't just roll up on his sister Tamar. Okay, they had, especially the men and the women, they were strictly kept apart for occasions like this. Okay, they were strictly kept apart. Okay, but when you did particular things, you had to check in with the father. This is what you call a patriarch. Okay, everything went through, all right, the father. Okay, it says, well, then Absalom said, if you can't come, how about sending my brother Amnon with us? Why Amnon? The king asked. Well, Absalom kept on pressing the king until he finally agreed to let his sons attend, including Amnon. So Absalom prepared a feast fit for a king. Okay, and it says, verse 28, Absalom told his men, wait until Amnon gets drunk. Then at my signal, kill him. Don't be afraid. I'm the one who has given the command. Take courage and do it. So Absalom signaled, all right. So Absalom signaled they murdered Amnon. Then the other sons of the king jumped on their mules and fled. As they were on their way back to Jerusalem, this report reached David. Absalom has killed all the king's sons. No one is left alive, which was a false report. Okay, so the other sons had dipped out. It says the king got up, tore his robe, and threw himself on the ground. His advisors also tore their clothes in horror and sorrow, So this is almost like the news that Job got, when Job was catching it. All right. But this was a false report, but one of his sons did be put to death. But just then, Jonadab, all right, this the nigga that stirred up all the madness. All right, then he come in, and said, but then Jonadab, the son of David's brother Shemiah, arrived and said, no, don't believe that all the king's sons have been killed. It is only Amnon. Absalom has been plotting this ever since Amnon, all right, took his sister, all right, Tamar. No, my lord, the king, your sons aren't all dead. It was only Amnon. Meanwhile, Absalom escaped. Then the watchman of Jerusalem wall saw a great crowd coming down to the hill of the road from the west. He ran to tell the king, I see a crowd of people coming from Horonaim road along, all right, the side of the hill. Okay, and the watchman, can see afar out. As we're, watchmen, through prophecy, we see afar out and we report it to the people. Okay, it says, look, Jonadab told the king, there they are now. The king's sons are coming, just as I said. They soon arrive, weeping and sobbing, and the king, all right, and all his servants wept bitterly with them. Okay, they soon arrive, weeping and sobbing, and the king and all his servants, all right, wept bitterly with them. So the king's sons pull up to the palace, to King David's house, and David mourned many days for his son Amnon. Absalom fled to his grandfather, all right, Tamar, son of Ahimad, the king, all right, of Geshur. He stayed there in Geshur for 3 years, and King David, now reconciled to Amnon's death, longed to be reunited with his son Absalom. So King David, he's going through a lot of family drama, and this was all due to, what he did. All right, and we see Amnon, he played and he sold to the flesh, and he reaped death. Okay, that's why you go here to Galatians chapter 6. Okay, and Galatians 6 and 7 says, don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of the Most High, because what he did to his sister was wrong. Okay, and we serve a power of righteous judgment. Okay, it says you will always harvest what you plant, and he sowed wickedness by what he did, to his sister. Okay, those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from their sinful nature, man. And this is what he harvested, because this is what he planted. Okay, death, sin. Okay, but those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit, man. So as we sow, okay, into spiritual things, we're going to harvest everlasting rewards. You see, for doing these lessons, for fasting, for, separating from this world, okay, from studying to being tapped into this, we're going to receive eternal life, man. We're going to receive eternal blessings for this, man. So what we're doing is sowing into the spirits, constantly making adjustments to get more in line, okay, with righteousness. This is, all right, leading to life eternal, man. We're going to harvest life eternal if we keep going in the spirit, okay, because of sowing to the flesh, all right, just out here wilding out in the flesh, it only leads to death, okay. And see, we're coming to the time where people, all right, are going to harvest what they've been sowing through this grace period, man. Okay, it says, so let's not get tired of doing what is good, because it's a thing of patience, man. All right, and you see, people sowing to the flesh, and seems like they're winning, like they're on. Okay, well, their harvest hasn't come yet. Okay, because there's a harvest for the wicked and there's a harvest for the righteous, man. So we shouldn't be weary in doing good. The harvest gonna come when it's needed. Okay, it says at just the right time we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. And the Lord, He allows us to harvest particular things in this life. Even before the kingdom, as we sow to the Spirit, the Lord, will allow us, to harvest things, in the Spirit, now, man. Where there's more understanding, more faith, a better situation, okay, more peace, okay. The Lord, He'll allow us to harvest things in the Spirit, and this is an incentive for us to keep going and sowing to the Spirit, man. So that was the point. I didn't want to make it too long with this one, but the Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters edified. Till next time I say shalom, Kwam Yashala, Abba soon, shalom.